Okay, so I'm going to start out with three things here, and then I'm going to read from page 159, which is in the basics, give generosity. So, as I've mentioned before, as I'm preparing for this, oftentimes just I'm thinking about things as it relates to kind of whatever, like my own practice and usually my own practice, things that are coming up with other people that I'm seeing, like patterns of. But for this particular hub, one of the things in this particular hub is that people talk about and speak of this, and I experience it. I'm experiencing it right now and rereading it, is the hurt. That this hurts. Going into the fourth hub is it's like it's evocative, and it's like it's uniquely painful in how it surfaces the hurt, and that's what we want, because what we're doing in a fourth hub practice is we're actually returning back to the part of ourselves that actually can be hurt. That's like a gong. Returning to ourselves, because a lot of what we're interfacing with when it comes to connection, love, vulnerability, um, belonging is an interface with our defenses. So it's not that it doesn't hurt, but it just sort of revalidates our idea of how we're supposed to operate in the world and fortifies either walls or fortifies patterns. But in the fourth hub, what we're doing is we're going back to this formation of ourselves, and reevaluating it, and in a sense, even renegotiating the um, the foundation. And so the hurt, the potency of it, like how badly it hurts. 'Cause it's like stings. It's like, oh my God. And you think about like the first hurts that have to do with the first hub, which are, like the being teased, being isolated, like the heartbreak and shock of it. It's a shock the first time it happens. And if you can remember it, most people either have it like kind of down, but can actually access it. It's really like sad, and it hurts really badly, because there's this love for that little version of ourselves, and like seeing that and like being defenseless to protect it at the time. Now you're not defenseless, important part of this process. Um, and lacking context. So it's just super overwhelming. So that hurt. First love, it's like you never love again like you loved when you were, your first love, and it's because of this open, like, love like you don't know how to be hurt kind of thing. And so it really does have a lot to do with the, like, being able to feel, because the protection, the adaptation that we or plural adaptations that we create protect us against that, because the first times that we experienced it, we didn't have the strength, the size, the context to be able to protect ourselves from the overwhelm of it. I mean, it's just, if you take a moment and just even call back, like bringing yourself into your your childhood home, and bring yourself and, like, remember what it felt like to be managing kind of like the stunned aftershock of something that had surprised you, like a kid pointing something out about you that you never realized, and the first time that you ever learn this thing about yourself, you learn it through a child pointing it out in a way like, "Hey, there's something," like, as a difference. It's in this time of wanting to belong, like, difference also becomes really caustic, like weirdness, and so the more that I think interruption that happens in this initial time, the more afraid of weirdness we are, because it's like it like deeply represents the lack of belonging and connecting. And as a result of that, it really impacts our ability to connect, period. So it's like this group of people that were kind of like a hodgepodge of folks that were sort of united and connected, like our cousins, neighborhood kids, school, like whatever, that yeah, that those people are still informing our sense of like how safe it is to connect with people. Uh, you know, so it should hurt. We want it to hurt. We want to get back to that. We want to be able to manage it and work with it and hurt and feel it. Um, the other thing is the process. And so, one of the things about Parinama is that so one of the things about Parinama is that, a lot of what at least I knew or thought I knew to seek out was related to kind of like changing the world around me. So it's living from the outside in. Like it's like so that the world could see me as prettier or more successful or richer or more lovable. I could be sweeter, more agreeable, more lovable. And that this is something that like is a place I could arrive at eventually, and in a lot in like especially when we look at consumer products as related to transformation and like wellness and even, like yoga and all the things we know or are kind of like sort of surfaced through, like culturally, media wise, about like, here's the stuff you can do that is going to help alleviate this feeling that you can't put your finger on, that there's something that's like kind of you want to be liberated from. And it's like I can get there, I can work towards it. And that it's kind of like it's like a relationship with time, being like you're a car, and if you just like kind of keep driving, you'll get there. It's like, well, let's just drive through the night so we can get the full day at the beach or whatever. It's like this thing. It's like, oh, and when we're at the beach, it's gonna be great, and that it really is more that time is passing through us, and the more like it passes through our patterning, it passes through our capacity. There's nothing that's going to be able, like, if you can't relax right now, if you're like, I always need to be doing something, the idea that peace is going to come through the achievement of something external, it's great. It work. The reason that works is that it's always in the future. So it's like there's never the real like call out on the fact this doesn't work, because it's always like, well, if I do a little bit more, it's oh, the reason I didn't get this feeling is because I didn't do it right, or I needed to do some more, or it's like, or the reason it's like losing a ton of weight and becoming really trim, or getting a lot of money, or getting the perfect home, or just like buying stuff, like consumer stuff, getting the perfect mate, where it's like, oh, well, the reason it kind of still feels the way that it feels to be you is that kind of the capacity, unless the capacity has been grown to feel the capacity for having your own sense of like individuality and to be able to stand alone, to exist in that comfortably, to continue growing that, the ability to feel. You don't have to don't have to hide who you are. and that you can have sort of a comfortable dynamic ability to, sort of interact and sort of, kind of mindfully just like sort of keep parts of yourself private, for, when it's in the service of one thing or another, but ultimately that proud of yourself. If you don't like, things aren't gonna do that for you. Like, they might give you a little bit of a taste of it, and they may even prompt you to do the hard work, but this is the hard work. This is the work where we're building this type of capacity. So, so the process is allowing the experience to arise. And one of the things is, as far as having a relationship with ourselves, is that, if we've pain, if we've sadness, I went through a period of a few days where I felt like really dense. It was related to like hormonal stuff and like my cycle, but it was like just this density. And I couldn't really connect with like wanting and like being able to enjoy things in a way, like, or even wanting things. Like second hub sort of was like, and it was like very first hub dense. And it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't pleasant. But instead of trying to like shut it up, like the thing about being like, all right, let's like move this feeling out. No bad feelings, no bad feelings. Um, is is like seeking to like giving it some space and curiosity and understanding like what's creating it and understanding like what it kind of like kind of what space it needs to occupy. The amount of rest it required was not the amount of rest I wanted to give it. The amount of like doing nothing was not something that I wanted to give it, but by giving it to myself, expanded. And even just sitting with myself when I'm kind of like an asshole, like sit like where I'm just kind of angsty and like it's like, oof, just and like dark and dense and like not joyful or happy, like almost impossible to please, very close to being like just very like, and to sit with myself in that instead of being like, oh my God, how do I go get a massage? Do I do just like be like, no, we're gonna just, it's like, okay, get your, mochi donut and sit here and um just kind of be with myself and get to know that part of myself, you know? And while I can't necessarily say it's something that I'd want to conjure up, it's like, oh, let's like hang out with her again. Um Actually, take that back. It's kind of like it's just more like there are parts of myself that I don't want to be with, that it's like, yeah, it's part of me. It's part of me. And that, yeah. So there's that. And so the first part is like it's like allowing it to be. The second is asking a question. So the whole thing about like the immediate like shut up kind of thing about like, okay, you're kind of in this like, you're feeling like, so it's like you're feeling worried or you're having anxiety or you're depressive or shameful or angry or resentful. It's to just like kind of spend time with that if you can. And it's hard. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, you just started hanging. It's to just sort of spend time with that. And also, and this too shall pass. That's one of the things like in these big kind of big feelings that feels like, oh, this is how life is now. And try to have like apply some context to it to be like, look, this is like one of the aspects of myself. Is to spend that time and then ask questions about it. And so the thing is like, so I'm characterizing it as dense. because very specifically, it was just like a low mood. So, it was like a low mood, and it was, like, kind of unpleasable. So, it was, like, exploring the characteristics of it, where it's like, this is dense. There's, like, a density to me. It's like the energy, it's like, oof, it's like, it doesn't wanna move, it doesn't wanna be pleased, it doesn't wanna, it's like, and it's not, like, very funny, like, it's kinda like, like, ugh, s you know Yeah, it'd be like a good cartoon. It's like 'cause it doesn't have, like, much of a, like, person. I think, I'd yeah. But and so asking the question my question was, how do I restore buoyancy here? How do I move this feeling? How do I lighten? Like, what is this how? How do I create more buoyancy? Because the thing that I wanted is I wanted the lightness restoration. It's like, I want and it doesn't need to be this esoteric. You can just be like, like, "Hey, how do I restore, a happier mood? How do I, like, create the space for this?" And so, just ask the question, don't, like, force it. And then then I woke up and immediately I was like, "Oh, I need to clear out my space." So I removed everything like all like the dried eucalypt I moved everything that's dry, all the dried flowers, all the dried plants that were decorative. It was just like intuitively, it's like I gotta get all this desiccated stuff out. Dryness. Like, I want things to be juicier, like, I guess, was kind of the thing. It was, like, really a sense of I had a couple plants that were, like, sort of dead, but still looked kind of cool, and I was like, "Nope, those go." I moved a ton of books, I donated those, moved things around, cleared things out, took, like, a tchotchkes, threw out a bunch of tchotchkes, that had been, like, lovely, like, gifts from people. And there were gifts from people, like, there were things that were kinda like little symbols and appreciations, and I was like, "Okay, I need to make room for more of that, like, new, 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 not hanging on to old." So it's like creating space to bring more lightness and it was really, like, after, like, an hour or 2, it's like immediately the sense was like, "Pew." And so, yeah, and it clear and that helped, like, process that. So, anyway, let's see where we at for time. Ah, shoot, I'm really short on time. Much for the few short things. So, okay, so I'm gonna read the give generosity part, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. So, and I'm going to, do the receive gratitude separately, and I'm gonna talk more about the dichotomy of the 2 existing together there, but we'll start right now with give generosity. So, if we don't have enough for ourselves, yet we give to people who can't receive or don't appreciate the offering, we're losing when giving. Organizational psychologist Adam Grant's Give and Take highlights multiple studies showing that givers are both the highest and lowest performing members of a sales organization. So, according to Grant, the difference between a giver who wins and a giver who loses comes down to 3 categories, which I call discernment, boundary, and connection to purpose. Discernment puts limits on the amount of giving to people who only intend to take. Boundary is giving is g in giving assures that we're making time to focus on our own goals, in addition to supporting others in theirs. And connection to purpose aligns our giving with our integrity, where it serves something or something important to us. So it's like the discernment, it's like, look, it's like giving the kind of giving with, like, kinda nothing in return kinda thing, and it's, like, clamping down on that, clamping down on that. Boundary, making sure that we're giving, but really making the time for our own self and developing our, working towards our own goals. And connection to purpose is making sure that we're giving with integrity. We're giving where it serves something or someone important to us. So that the giving isn't indiscriminate, that it really is like in alignment with our integrity. Yeah, that. So when we evaluate, and I'm going to leave it at that. When we evaluate our giving through the lens of these three categories, we may encounter reflexive cultural conditioning that emphasizes the so-called virtue of generosity. So giving is one side of the dynamic of give and take, generosity and gratitude, but generosity morphs into martyrdom and will express low self-worth when we support people who do not support us. Reference those three categories. So it's giving. I'm going to repeat these again. It's really limiting how much we're giving to people who only intend to take. Like really being very mindful of that. And then the boundary is like the amount of giving relative to the time we need to focus on our own goals and in addition to supporting others, but being aware of that, the cost that giving takes, and like balancing that mindfully. And then connection to purpose is that our giving is in alignment with things and people, like missions or whatever, like organizations, whatever, and people that are like aligned with our integrity. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. So yeah. But that generosity morphs into martyrdom and will express low self-worth when we support people who do not support us. So Anais Nin noted, I was always ashamed to take, so I gave. It was not a virtue, it was a disguise. Once again, Anais Nin, I was always ashamed to take, so I gave. It was not virtue, it was a disguise. So there's an artistry, sensitivity, and curiosity in giving well. And unless we fear scarcity or feel discomfort with vulnerability, giving comes naturally. The fourth hub is one of altruism and the inclination to give. But some folks either conflate altruism, kindness, and compassion into attempts to win favor, pleasure, and rewards for themselves. So they distrust the generosity of others because they sense real or imagined sinister motives. So Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, see Chapter 5, writes, our material culture tries to explain even unselfishness as arising from selfish motives. It's often asserted, cynically, that people who act in kindly ways without any benefit to themselves are doing so only to feel good. Neuroscience does not support this view, end quote. So the neurobiology of altruism shows that the location in our brains that activates during a selfless act is a different area from the pleasure and reward-seeking behavior centers. When we give, talk about receiving in a bit later. So our human dignity requires that we can give and contribute. Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, called the psychological stage of development, the fourth hub, aligns with the fourth hub, industry versus inferiority. And during my interviews for the Parinama method, I met with people living in shelters and on the street, and I was often offered food, drink, and other gifts. At first, taking was confronting for me. But eventually I came to understand that receiving the generosity built trust and was deeply humanizing for both of us, creating balance with the items I'd buy or relatively small amounts of money I gave. Yeah, that's really that there's a lot I originally had to say on that, but it was just kind of like a little too pedantic. But that, like, the realization that my fear initially in these relationships and conversations was just like how much they'd want from me. and the feeling of like, oh my gosh, that I could like theoretically give it and that I wouldn't, and I introduced this whole conflict of seeing suffering and walking away from it. And I found that there was like a tremendous desire to give because it's part of human dignity to contribute. Industry versus inferiority. So the Eric Erickson developmental stage, like Google it if it's like, read a little bit more about it, or however you do that. Don't like if it's not Googling. Um, is really about the sense of dignity and connection that giving offers, and that when people feel that they have nothing to give, think of like even saying that, it's like so apparent, is that to tell somebody they have nothing to give is like it just feels like one of the most terrible things that you could ever say to somebody, is that they have nothing to contribute. So, originally I was really surprised by the impetus to like give me like snacks and little trinkets and things like that. Even cigarettes, people would offer me like, like, I mean, that kind of thing. And that it's like understanding that is really it's like how giving is really such an important part of loving and belonging and existing. So next we'll read about receiving and gratitude, and I'll talk a little bit more about the dichotomy of the two together. But that's it for now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm just going to bounce off right now because I want to go get some breakfast. All right, bye.